Hello everybody and welcome to number 6 of our Python tutorial exercises. With this problem we're going to be looking over Lambda functions. Okay, and these are a special type of function in Python. And we're going to see the difference between our Lambda functions and our regular functions that we've been looking at so far. So recall that our previous functions had a lot of pieces. We had the df keyword, the name of our function. Then when we opened up our parentheses, that's where we decided on the number of parameters, right? The pieces of data that this function needs. And then we see that we closed it off with the colon. And then when we hit enter, now we were in the body of our function. Okay. Lambda functions are a little bit different, but they serve the same purpose. Okay, still a function, except Lambda functions are written with less code. So you're able to write Lambda functions a lot quicker than you would a traditional function. Okay. So on the right here in our instructions, we have a couple of facts before we get into the question. So we see that it is a very special type of function in the Python world. Okay, and especially because usually we could just create a Lambda function just in one line. Okay, as opposed to our traditional functions, which could take multiple lines. And we saw that with our previous examples. Okay. So we see a couple more aspects of Lambda functions. Okay, we're going to see the similarities and the differences once we actually create our Lambda function. Okay, so let's look at the instructions, and it says we want to create a variable called isOdd. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And it says assign a Lambda function to it that returns true or false if a given number is odd. Okay, so if a given number is odd, we want to return true. And if a given number is even, then we want to return false. Okay, and we see we got an example here of creating this using our regular functions that we've been doing so far. So Lambda function is a little bit different, and we're going to see that now. So it says here we want to assign a Lambda function to it, and to it is referring to our variable isOdd. So let's go ahead and assign a Lambda function to it. So our Lambda functions need our Lambda keyword. Okay, and we see that it lights up in blue because it's one of Python's reserved keyword. Just like when we saw with our functions, you see our df turned blue. That's because that's another Python reserved keyword. Okay, so our Lambda function needs this keyword. So far we have a variable and we're assigning it our Lambda function. And in this next spot here, this is where we determine our number of parameters. Okay, so for this one we just need one. So let's just call it num for number. Okay, and we're going to need our colon. And here is where the body of the function is now. This is where we create the body of the function. So what do we want to do? We want to return true if the number is odd, okay, and false if it's even. Okay, so we're able to do that with our modulo operators, and we're going to discuss that in a second here. Okay, so we just want to check if the number that we pass in, right, our parameter, we just want to check if our parameter, and we mod it by 2, and if that doesn't equal 0, then we know that a number is odd, okay, which then will return true. Okay, so before we run this code, let's take a look at our modulo arithmetic. Okay, so you're going to hear mod or modulo, okay, it's all it cares about is the remainder. Okay, so for example, if we have 10 mod 3, the first thing we should ask ourselves is how many times does 3 go into 10 evenly? Okay, and that's 3 times. And then what's the remainder? We know that we're trying to get to 10. Since we're at 9, then the remainder will be 1. Okay, so this equals 1. Okay, and let's look at the same example, number 10. So what if we have 10 mod 2? Okay, how many times is 2 going to 10 evenly? We know that it's 5 times, so the remainder is 0. Okay, remember, modulo only cares about the remainder. Okay, so it's interesting, this pattern that we have so far. Let's continue. So if we have, let's say the same number, so let's say 10, or let's say 11, and we mod it by 2 again. How many? So again, we should ask ourselves, how many times does 2, right, or whatever number this is on the right, goes into the number on the left evenly? Okay, we know this will go in evenly 5 times, right? 5 times 2 is 10. We're trying to get to 11, so the remainder is 1. Okay. Let's look at one more example. Maybe you'll see the pattern already. Let's say we have 12 and we mod it by 2. And we know that there's no remainder, right? 2 times 6 is 12, so the remainder will be 0. So the pattern is this. Anytime we mod an even number by 2, we're going to get back 0, meaning there's no remainder. Okay, and that's the computer's way of checking if a number is even or odd. Okay. We as humans, we can look at numbers and we can determine, if it's even or odd, right? But a computer needs some way to check, and this is how a computer checks. It takes the mod of that number, and we specifically mod numbers by 2, and we check if it has any remainder. Okay, so if the remainder is equal to 0, then we know that that number is even. Okay, if we mod it by 2 and the number has a remainder, that number is odd. Okay, and you can try that with any number. You see, you're gonna get the same results. Okay, so back to our case. Again, we have our variable is odd, and we're assigning it our lambda function, and we're passing in the number of parameters. In this case, we just have 1. Okay, now our parameter, we're checking if when we mod a number by 2, if it does not equal 0. Okay, and if it does not, and this is the operation, our logical operator for not equal to. Okay, so we also have logical operators, and this is what we use to compare data when we're programming. You're going to see we have our less than sign, our greater than sign, our is equal to, it compares if two values are equal to each other. And what we have up there is our not equal to. It checks if two values don't equal each other. Okay. So here we're checking if the number that we mod by 2, we're checking it if it does not equal 0. Okay. We know that if we mod a number by 2 and it does not equal 0, in our case, we know that number is odd. Okay. So we see how this is a lot quicker to write than our regular function. See, we don't have the return keyword, we don't have the def keyword, we don't have to open up our parentheses to determine our number of parameters like we have here. Okay, so you see how we can have this function all written out super quick. Okay. So now let's run our test cases, and you see everything works how it's supposed to. Okay, so see, lambda functions can be useful. You can write it out really quickly. Again, we have our variable that we're assigning our lambda function to. We have the number of parameters. Right, in this case, we just have 1. Okay, and then when we call our function, we're going to pass in a value to it. So let's say we pass in 5. So now our num variable will be represented by 5. So now we're checking if 5 mod 2 does not equal 0. And we know that it won't, so it's going to return true. Okay. So that wraps it up for number 6, and I'll see you in the next video.